When the world goes quiet, some voices still remain. Not every soul finds peace when the clock strikes 12. There are stories hidden in the shadows, whispers drifting between the living and the forgotten. Some stories linger, some souls don't leave. Welcome to Stillness After Midnight, where every silence tells a story. If you're drawn to the mysteries that stir after dark, the voices that echo when the world sleeps, subscribe now and join us as we listen to the souls who still have something to say, because in the stillness, the truth finally speaks. Have you ever woken up and not known whether you were still dreaming? That's how it began. There was no ceiling above me, no sky, just a vast expanse of gray stretching endlessly, like a memory that had forgotten its own meaning. The air didn't move, the silence didn't breathe. And yet I was there, aware, conscious, painfully awake. I tried to sit up, but I didn't feel a body, not the way I used to. There were no limbs, no heartbeat, only a presence. Me without me. And in that first disorienting moment, I thought perhaps I was lost in a dream, until I remembered the fall, the mountain, the ledge, the scream that never came. The way he looked at me, eyes wide, not with fear, but with something worse, something that haunts even now. Recognition. My brother. His name rose from within me, soft and broken. Michael. It should have echoed, but it vanished the moment it left whatever part of me still carried a voice. This place didn't hold sound. It devoured it. I stood. No. I moved, pulled forward by instinct more than will. The ground beneath me was not stone, not earth. It felt like memory, soft in places, jagged in others. Familiar around me, a landscape formed slowly, not as if I were entering it, but as if it were rising from within me. Trees bent under the weight of invisible grief. A pale sky flickered with stormlight. And somewhere in the distance, I felt him, or rather, the absence of him. Michael wasn't here. His soul, wherever it had gone, had not stayed in this place. I knew it in the way you know a room is empty even before you open the door. A hollowness shaped like him. And yet, I felt threads, remnants of what once was, woven through the very air. Pieces of him caught in the cracks of time. I began to walk, not because I knew where to go, but because standing still in this silence was worse than any road ahead. Each step was like sifting through memory, stirring dust from the corners of my guilt. And it was there, in that lifeless plain, that the first shadow took form. Not a creature, not a person, a door. It stood alone, freestanding in the nothingness, tall, warped, aged by years that didn't belong here. On its surface were scratches, claw marks, it seemed, but no handle, no hinges, just a faint symbol at its center, a single, curved line, like the shape a river might take as it turns away. I knew what it meant, though I wished I didn't. Regret. The door didn't wait for me to decide. It opened on its own, slowly, without sound. And what lay beyond it wasn't a room. It was the first memory. It began with light, warm, gentle sunlight filtering through lace curtains. The kitchen of our childhood home, Mom at the stove, humming that old Willie Nelson tune. And there we were, Michael and I, no older than 7 and 10. He sat beside me at the table, cross-legged on the chair like always, swinging his feet as he picked the raisins out of his oatmeal and dropped them onto mine. "You like 'em more than me?" he whispered with a grin. I hadn't remembered this in years, but now it played in perfect detail, the way his hair stuck up at the crown, the freckle just beneath his right ear, the softness in his eyes. I watched, unseen, unheard, and I wanted nothing more than to reach out, to hold him, to tell him I was sorry. But the memory didn't pause for my longing. It faded like all things do, leaving behind only the ache of what used to be. Back in the gray expanse, the door vanished. In its place was a trail, narrow, winding, carved through a field of ash-colored grass that didn't sway. Nothing moved here unless I willed it, or unless it remembered me. And somewhere along that path, I felt it, the weight of my guilt, pulsing beneath the surface like something alive. I didn't need judgment. I was already sentenced. He had been the better man, the better brother. He had trusted me with his hand as we stood on that cliff. He had laughed, even then, saying, "Don't look down, John, it's a long way to fall." And I let go. Not just of him, of everything we were, everything we could have been. Now I walk this place, not to escape it, but to find him, to say what I never did, to hear what he might never say, to know if there is a redemption deep enough to reach the soul I buried with him. Somewhere in this realm, Michael's soul remains. Or maybe it doesn't. But I must look, because if he is still here, if even a flicker of his light survives in the cracks of this forgotten world, I will find him, even if I have to walk through every memory I've ever tried to forget. The path narrowed. It no longer wound gently through the stillness, but cut sharp and deliberate, as if the very ground beneath me resented my presence. The ash-colored grass faded, giving way to a cold, cracked soil that seemed to whisper beneath every step. It wasn't wind I heard, but murmurs, echoes that never quite formed words. I followed them. They led me to water, not the kind that sparkles or flows with life, but a river thick and slow, like ink spilled across an unwritten page. Its surface shimmered not with reflection, but with fragments, images, words, fleeting thoughts that had never found voice. And I knew, without needing to be told, what this place was: the river of the unsaid. Every sentence I had swallowed, every truth I had buried, every silence that carved space between us, they were here. I stepped closer, drawn not by curiosity, but by guilt. The river didn't rage. It mourned. It sighed, gently and endlessly, like someone who has given up asking to be heard. The first ripple broke, and in it, I saw myself, 16 years old, sitting in the car with Michael after our parents' funeral. He was 12, eyes red and puffy, clutching the folded flag so tight his knuckles turned white. I stared out the window, jaw locked, throat burning. So many words begged to be spoken. "We'll be okay. I'm here for you. You don't have to be strong." But I said none of them. I remember thinking, if I break, he'll break too. So I swallowed the grief and wore silence like armor. I didn't see then that he needed more than my strength. He needed me. The vision faded. Another ripple. Another silence. We were older now, college years. He called late one night, voice shaking, saying he'd failed a class. Felt like a disappointment. I remember hearing him, but not really listening. I told him to man up, to stop whining, to handle it like an adult. I heard my own voice now, playing back from the water, flat, impatient, cold. He had needed comfort. I gave him contempt. The river pulled me closer, like it knew there was more. A third image formed, more recent, just a few months before the mountain. We were at his house. His wife had made dinner. He laughed as he told me their little boy had started calling him Captain Daddy. I smiled, nodded, pretended. But inside me, something twisted. Jealousy, not just of the child or the house, but of his joy, his peace. Because despite everything, despite being the older one, the one who had done all the right things on paper, he had built something I hadn't: a family, a life, a soul unburdened by bitterness. And I hated him for it. not with rage, but with silence. I never said I was proud of him. Never told him I missed the days we used to be everything to each other. Never admitted that I was afraid I'd lost my place in his world. The river surged then, not with water, but with voices. My voice, his voice, woven into the current. Why didn't you call? Why didn't you ask? Why didn't you say something? They echoed not as questions, but as accusations, gentle, almost sorrowful, but impossible to ignore. And then came the one I feared most. Why didn't you tell me? You hated me? I staggered back. Though I had no feet to move, my essence reeled from the wound. Because that was the truth I had never said. Not even to myself. I had hated him. Not all of him. Not always. But enough. Enough to let resentment fester. To let the years build a quiet wall between us. Brick by wordless brick. The river did not judge me. It only revealed, in its depths, I saw all the times we could have laughed, but didn't. All the hugs left unshared. All the I'm sorries that would have changed everything if spoken. It was never about the will or the inheritance or the land. It was about love, how we failed to give it when it mattered most. And now one of us was dead, the other not truly alive. I fell to my knees, though I had no body, and let the memory of his laugh wrap around me. It was soft, familiar, the kind that crinkled his eyes and made me feel, even for a moment, like we still belonged to each other. I miss you, I whispered. The river heard. A single droplet lifted from its surface, rising into the air like a floating tear. It hovered before me, trembling with light. Then it fell into my chest and I felt warmth, fleeting, but real. Maybe the unsaid could never be undone, but perhaps in this place, they could still be heard. And if they could be heard, then maybe, just maybe, I wasn't too late. I thought I'd known guilt. I thought I had already bled everything I could in the river of the unsaid. But regret is different. It doesn't whisper. It clings. It doesn't simply show you what you didn't say. It shows you who you were when it mattered most. I found myself at the edge of a forest where the trees weren't just tall, they loomed. Their trunks curved like twisted spines, their branches bare, reaching out like fingers desperate to grab. There were no birds, no breeze, only a strange, constant hum, like the breath of something old and tired. I didn't want to go in, but I was already walking. The path wound in slow spirals. With every step, the air thickened, as if it remembered things my mind had long buried. Then the first regret appeared, not as a scene, but a presence. I was 12 again, and Michael was 8, tugging on my sleeve outside the school gates. He had just been hit in the face during a dodgeball game and was trying not to cry. I remember his lip trembling, asking if I'd walk home with him. I remember what I did too. I shoved him off and laughed with my friends. "Don't be a baby," I'd said. The memory didn't end there. It lingered. The moment looped again and again, his eyes wide with betrayal, his small frame shrinking as I walked away. And then the forest answered back. The branches above twisted, forming his voice, not from the past, but from after. I waited for you that day until the sun went down. I wanted to scream that I was just a kid, that I didn't know better, but regret doesn't care how old you were. The deeper I walked, the older I became. I saw the Christmas he got me a handmade wooden pen holder with our initials carved in it. He was 15. I was 19. I gave him cash in an envelope without even looking him in the eyes. I remembered telling our aunt, "He's too emotional." I remembered watching his face fall when I didn't use it, when I left it behind at her house. The trees shifted again. They became silhouettes, ghosts of myself walking ahead, never turning around, never looking back. And always, Michael followed, smaller, quieter, always watching me. I stopped near a clearing. There was a tree in the center, larger than the rest. Its trunk was split in two, one half pale and healthy, the other charred and rotting. Hanging from it were hundreds of small objects, paper airplanes, Lego bricks, a shared comic book, a toy sword from a Halloween when we were both knights. These were the relics of who we had once been. Brothers, yes. But more than that, best friends. We didn't need anyone else when we were kids. I used to wait for him at the bus stop even when I didn't need to. He used to sneak me the corner brownie from Mom's tray, even though it was his favorite. I taught him how to ride a bike. He taught me how to laugh again after Dad left. What happened to us? Was it just time? Was it pride? Was it the world demanding we become men and leave tenderness behind? Or was it me, always walking ahead, assuming he'd follow? I walked beneath the tree. The charred half cracked loudly as I passed, and I saw something buried in the roots. An old envelope, the inheritance document, my signature, my choice. I had found a legal loophole, something minor, a clause that allowed me to shift ownership. Technically, it was all fair, nothing illegal, no paper trail of betrayal, but the ink had barely dried before he called me. I could still hear his voice. "Hey, did you know about this?" And mine, "It's complicated. Mike, don't overreact." He never yelled. He never cursed me. He just said, "Okay, I guess I misunderstood." But in the forest, I could hear what he really meant beneath those words. "I trusted you." That was the moment I lost him. Not when he died, but then. The forest pulsed around me. The trees trembled, their branches forming hands, hundreds of them, reaching out, touching my chest, my back, my arms. Each hand felt like a choice I had made. Some small, some cruel, all irreversible. One gripped tighter than the rest. A final memory surged forward. Our last hike. He was quiet that morning, unusually so. There was something in his face, peaceful, almost resigned. I had chalked it up to exhaustion, but now I wondered, did he know? Did he see the resentment in my eyes? Did he feel my hesitation when we stood near the edge? Did he hear what my silence screamed? The moment replayed, not the fall, but before it, the way he looked at me. It wasn't fear, it wasn't anger, it was grief. Grief for the brother I had stopped being. I dropped to my knees beneath the tree. My chest ached with a weight that no death could match. I hadn't lost him on that cliff. I'd been losing him for years, one decision at a time. The forest didn't punish me. It simply let me see. And seeing was enough to tear me apart. In the silence that followed, I whispered, "I'm sorry." But the trees didn't echo it, because regret, once spoken, doesn't disappear. It simply waits. The path out of the forest was narrow, so narrow, I barely fit. The trees pressed inward, forcing me to move slowly. Their bark scraped against my shoulders like cold, unspoken accusations. Eventually, the branches opened into a clearing, not peaceful, not warm, but still, hollow. At the center stood a mirror, tall, ornate, ancient, but it didn't reflect the forest behind me. It reflected a room I once lived in, my childhood bedroom. I stepped forward, my breath caught. Inside the mirror, I saw myself, but not as I am now. Not the soul wandering this strange afterlife. Not the man I became. No, it was me at 35. Sharp suit, cold eyes, perfect smile. The man who stood at his brother's funeral and said, "Michael was a light in this world, a kind soul, a devoted family man." The man who returned to his office 2 days later and signed over the deed Michael had once begged him to reconsider. This reflection didn't blink. It didn't speak, but it watched me. I turned away, but the trees had vanished. There was only the mirror, only me. And then it laughed. Not loud, not mocking, just enough to cut. Still pretending you didn't mean to do it? The reflection asked, tilting its head. I didn't, I replied too quickly. I lost my balance. It was an accident. The reflection stepped closer. So why did you hesitate before reaching for him? I said nothing. It continued. You could have grabbed his wrist. You had time. You even looked at him. But you waited. No, I said, softer. No, I was frozen. You were relieved. That hit like ice. I stepped back. I grieved him, I whispered. I still grieve him. The reflection nodded. Of course you did. But tell me this. Was it grief or guilt? Silence. Then it changed. The image shifted, becoming Michael in his final moment, falling, eyes wide, not with fear, but knowing, as if he understood and forgave me. The mirror shattered, but I was still staring. Because the shards didn't fall, they floated, each piece reflecting a version of me, the liar, the coward, the opportunist, the grieving brother, the child who left Michael crying at school, the teenager who rolled his eyes when Michael tried to talk, the man who told himself, "This is just business." Each shard spoke in unison. You needed someone to blame, and I did. For years, I blamed our parents for playing favorites. I blamed Michael for being too sensitive. I blamed the world for being unfair. And finally, I blamed fate for taking him, because if I blamed myself, I might never recover. One shard drifted closer. It showed the moment I received the call from Michael's wife. He's gone. And my response, not shock, not tears, just a long pause. And then, where? Because I knew where. The same mountain we had climbed as kids. The same one we had promised each other to return to, only when things were right between us. We never made it right. We never even tried. I sank to my knees. My hands trembled as they reached for the shards, slicing my palms open with each touch. Not pain, but memory. Not blood, but shame. I saw myself at the reading of the will. I saw Michael's wife watching me, not with anger, but something worse. Disappointment, because she knew, too. Everyone knew. They just chose silence over war. And now, in this space, there was no more silence. The mirror spoke again, not as a voice, but a feeling that filled the air around me. Truth begins when blame ends. I looked around. The clearing was still, but not empty. Behind where the mirror had stood was a door, wooden, simple, carved with symbols I couldn't read. I understood what it meant, to pass through. I would have to speak it, the thing I had never said. I stood, wiped the blood from my hands, closed my eyes, and for the first time since Michael died, I said the words. I killed my brother, not just with that final push, but with every moment I chose self over love, control over understanding, pride over forgiveness. The door opened, but the darkness behind it didn't feel like punishment. It felt necessary. As I stepped through, I heard one final whisper. The path to forgiveness is not found, it is made. And so I walked, not to escape, but to atone. The path was dust now. No trees, no sky, only a trail of ash beneath my bare feet, leading towards something distant and dim. A house. It stood alone, tilted slightly, as if the weight of time had worn down one side. It wasn't large, a single story, no porch, no lights, just a door, slightly ajar. And yet, It pulled at me. Not curiosity, recognition. I stepped forward. The air changed. Heavy, quiet. The kind of quiet that doesn't invite peace, but demands attention. Inside, it was dark, but not empty. The door groaned as I pushed it open fully. My hand trembled against the wood, not from fear, but from something deeper, something brittle and old, a grief I hadn't touched in decades. I crossed the threshold. The first room was a living room, but not mine, not any I remembered. Still, I knew it. Toys scattered in one corner. A drawing of two stick figures taped to the wall. The crayon faded, but the name still legible. Ben and Michael. A wave passed through me. I had drawn that when we were 8 and 6, back when Michael followed me everywhere. When he still called me Benny and believed I could fix anything. Monsters under the bed, bullies at school, broken toys. I stepped closer. On a nearby couch sat two old action figures, worn, faded. One was missing an arm, Michael's favorite. I could still hear him crying the day it broke, and I could still hear myself laughing at him for crying. I never replaced it. "I'll get you a new one," I had said, brushing him off, but I never did. Why? Because I forgot. Not just the promise, but him. The next room appeared as I moved forward. I hadn't opened a door. The house moved with me. A kitchen, dim, cold, smelling faintly of burnt toast. On the table, a birthday cake, untouched. I counted the candles. 10. Michael's 10th birthday. I had skipped it. Said I had soccer practice, but I didn't. I just didn't want to deal with him. He had annoyed me that week, being clingy, asking too many questions. I was 12 and thought I was too old for birthday parties. He waited for me anyway. Mom told me he refused to blow out the candles until I arrived. They burned down to stubs. He never made a wish. I pressed my hand to the table and felt it. The ache of time lost. And beneath it, shame. The hallway stretched before me now, narrow and pulsing with a quiet, rhythmic sound. A heartbeat? No. Footsteps. Soft. Bare. Like a child walking alone at night. I followed. The next room was a study. Books lined the walls, but the desk was empty, except for a single sheet of paper. A drawing again. This time, a mountain, and two stick figures at the top. Michael had drawn this one. I recognized his messy handwriting at the bottom. "When we grow up, we'll climb it together, just you and me." And we did. But it wasn't how we imagined. Not as brothers on an adventure, as adversaries on the edge of something we couldn't name. I remember the way he looked at me at the summit, not with resentment, but disappointment. He had known, even then, that I had changed, that somewhere along the way, I had stopped being his brother and become someone else. The man who wanted more, who built a business and forgot birthdays, who saw family as obstacles, who saw Michael as a liability. I fell to my knees. The house shifted. The walls trembled. The floor cracked, revealing beneath it mirrors, hundreds of them. Each one showing a memory I didn't want to remember. Michael waiting for me outside the principal's office, scared, and me pretending not to see him. Michael asking if he could move in with me after Dad died, and me saying I was too busy for that. Michael's last email, "Can we talk? I need you," marked as read, never replied. And then, the last memory. That day on the mountain, his face, his words. "Ben, are you even my brother anymore?" I didn't answer. I just reached for the map in his hand. We argued. He accused me. I told him he was paranoid. He said I was cruel. I pushed him. I told myself it was instinct, a reaction. But now I saw it for what it was. Not a slip, a decision, And worse, a release. The house whispered, "You traded love for legacy." I screamed, not out of anger, but because the silence had finally become unbearable. The rooms collapsed, one by one, not with violence, with sorrow. They didn't burn. They didn't crumble. They folded, like memories finally laid to rest. When I opened my eyes, I was standing in a single room, empty except for a chair, and in it, a boy, 6 years old, bright eyes, messy hair, Michael. He didn't speak, just looked at me and smiled. I fell to my knees again. "I'm sorry," I whispered, but he didn't nod. He didn't forgive me. He just watched, because this wasn't the real Michael. It was the part of him I had buried, the part that still waited for me, in the places I left behind, in the promises I never kept. The house began to fade. So did he. And just before he vanished, he spoke, not in words, but in memory. "You were my hero." Then he was gone, and I was alone again, but lighter. The ash beneath my feet had become soil. Something could grow here now. There are places in the afterlife that don't whisper. They hum. The river of the unsaid was one of them. It stretched before me, still and glass-like, a ribbon of black water cutting through an endless plain of gray mist. There were no shores, no wind, no birds overhead, just the sound of something beneath the surface, murmuring. I stood at its edge, barefoot, the soil damp and cold. The air carried a strange pressure, like standing beside someone you once loved but could never speak to again. That kind of silence, dense, regretful, familiar. There was no bridge, no boat, just the water. A voice, mine, but older, wearier, rose from somewhere behind my ribs. "You can't cross until you hear it all." I stepped forward. The water met my toes, then my ankles. It was not cold. It was memory. With every step, it crept higher. Knees, hips, chest, each inch pulling something from inside me. Words, sentences, fragments I had long since buried beneath pride and fear. Then I heard it. A voice, his voice, Michael, but not yelling, not pleading, just talking. "You never said goodbye." The water rippled, then shimmered. A memory rose like a ghost, projected on the mist ahead. Michael, standing by the front door, suitcase in hand. I was already in the car, engine running. He had just lost his job. He had asked to stay with me. I said I was going on a business trip, that I'd call him next week. I never did. The memory faded, but the ache did not. The water deepened. "You never asked if I was okay." His voice again, another shimmer, another moment. Michael at the hospital. Not for himself, he was visiting Mom. After her fall, I was on a conference call, pacing outside her room. He had said, "She keeps asking for you." And I had said, "I'm here, aren't I?" But I never sat beside her bed, never held her hand. I let Michael do it all. He had looked at me that day like a stranger. The river darkened. I kept walking. "You never told me you were proud." The next memory cut deeper than the others. Michael on stage, receiving an award for his volunteer work with struggling veterans. The auditorium wasn't large, but it was full. He looked for me in the crowd. I had promised to come. I hadn't. He called me that night. I didn't answer. I was closing a deal. That deal made me millions. He never brought the award up again. I wanted to say something, scream, cry, collapse, but the river wouldn't let me. It asked for silence. It asked for listening. "You never said I mattered." That one didn't come with a memory, just a feeling. The kind that blooms in a child's chest when their hero stops showing up. the kind that becomes a belief. Maybe I was never enough. I wept, not because of what I had done, but because of what I had not done. I had not been cruel to Michael in the way villains are cruel. I had been absent. I had let silence grow between us until it became the only thing we shared. And in that silence, he drowned. The water was up to my chin now. I could barely breathe. And then, one last voice, mine, but younger, softer. I love you, Mikey. And his voice, smaller still. Then why don't you say it? That was the last time we hugged. I think he knew, even then, that I wouldn't stay close. I tried to speak. The river swallowed it. No words came, only breath, gasping. Then something shifted. A hand from beneath the surface, small, familiar. Michael's. Not adult Michael, not the man I had pushed away, the child, the boy who once built forts with me in the backyard, the one who cried when I got hurt and laughed when I made up songs to scare away ghosts. He held my hand without judgment, just memory, and somehow I could breathe again. The river began to recede, slowly. It didn't spit me out, it let me go. As I stepped onto the other side, the mist lifted, and I saw something impossible. Letters. Dozens of them strung on a long line like laundry drying in the wind, fluttering softly between two trees that hadn't been there before. I reached out and took one. The envelope read, "Unsent, from Ben to Michael." Inside, "I'm sorry. I love you. I miss you. I wish I had said this sooner." Dozens more waited, each one a confession I never made. And though it was too late to send them, it wasn't too late to read them. So I did. Every word, every regret, every truth. And for the first time since I had died, I felt alive, not healed, but wounded in the open. The kind of wound that finally begins to close. The path beyond the river twisted through a dead forest, trees stripped of bark, branches gnarled like accusing fingers. There was no wind, no sky, only the echo of footsteps that didn't feel like mine, and the slow, rhythmic tolling of a bell in the far distance. Each chime sank into the ground, like a judgment passed in silence. I walked, because there was no going back, because regret had become momentum. At last, I reached the clearing. A circle of mirrors surrounded me, 12 in total, each taller than a man, curved inward like the ribs of a giant long buried beneath time. In the center, a single stone bench, cracked and worn. Above it, words hung in the air, not written, not spoken, but known. This is the trial of names. You will be judged by what they called you. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. The first mirror lit, and there he was, my father, broad-shouldered, stern-eyed, the man who believed in discipline over affection. His voice filled the space like thunder cracking open an old house. You were the strong one, the smart one. You were supposed to take care of him. The mirror darkened. The second mirror shimmered into life. My mother, frail and warm, with sadness tucked permanently beneath her smile. You were always distant, even as a boy. I tried to understand you, but you shut us out. You shut him out. Her words stung more than father's. I wanted to tell her I had just wanted to be enough, that I had chased success like a child chasing approval. But the trial was not for me to speak. The third mirror lit, my childhood friend, Aaron. You always pretended to be the protector, but the truth, you needed to win. Even if no one else was playing, he laughed bitterly, brokenly. You competed with a boy who only ever wanted your love. The fourth mirror remained dark, then the fifth, the sixth, until the seventh mirror flared with light, and for the first time, it was Michael. He was younger, maybe 23. Hope still clung to his face like sunlight before a storm. I called you Ben the Unshakable. Remember? You were my mountain, my big brother, my example. He paused, and then the smile died. But when I needed you most, you weren't stone, you weren't mountain, you were gone. His image flickered, then returned. Older this time, eyes heavy, a man worn thin by disappointment. And in the end, you chose money, not with a gun, not with a knife, but with silence, with distance, with ambition. You killed me slowly, Ben, then pushed me to finish the job. I fell to my knees, but the trial wasn't done. The remaining mirrors lit up with strangers, people I had forgotten, a woman I fired to protect a deal, a veteran Michael had helped, who never knew we were brothers, a college roommate I had betrayed, each with a name they had for me: selfish, charismatic, unreachable, cold, godlike. And one voice, one I didn't recognize, spoke last. A child's voice, soft, frightened. He told me I wasn't important. Without saying a word, I whispered, "Who are you?" But no answer came. Only the final mirror. It was blank. At first, then a reflection appeared. It was me, but not the man I remembered. Not Benjamin Whitmore, the CEO. Not the older brother. Not the liar. This version of me was empty, eyes dulled, skin cracked, suit stained with something darker than blood. And beneath the image, a word formed, burned into the glass. Nothing. I stood. I wanted to scream, to fight, to beg, but there was no judge here. Only truth. Only the names we gather and the ones we give away. And then, unexpectedly, a voice behind me, soft, familiar. Michael again, not from a mirror, but from the edge of the circle. The worst part isn't what they called you, Ben. It's what you believed. He stepped forward, not in anger, in grief. You thought you had to be perfect. That love was earned, not given. So you buried the boy who cried with me in the attic during storms. The one who sang me to sleep when I had nightmares. You forgot that boy. He placed a hand on my shoulder. Warm. Real. But I didn't. The mirrors shattered. Not loudly. Gently. Like glass grown tired of holding lies. The fragments fell to the ground, revealing sky, deep blue, for the first time, and somewhere in the distance. The bell stopped ringing. Michael stepped back. The trial's over. Ben. But the sentence is up to you. There it stood, a jagged peak clawing into the sky, as if the earth itself was trying to forget something it had once buried in its own marrow. Its summit was shrouded in mist, not white, but the color of ash, like burnt paper memories swirling in slow motion. They called it the Mountain of the Forgotten. It was not a place for the living, nor the dead. It was a place for those caught between. And I was one of them. The path was steep. Each step I took sank into gravel made of abandoned memories, faces half-formed, voices that ended mid-sentence. I passed broken toys, a pair of glasses, a burnt photograph. None of them mine, or maybe all of them were. Behind me, the forest disappeared. Before me, silence thickened. I climbed, and with each breath, the air grew heavier with what I refused to remember. I saw him again, not Michael this time. Me, but not the version from the mirrors. This one was younger, maybe 17, slouched, angry, eyes blazing with silent accusation. He sat on a boulder, blocking the path like a gatekeeper. "Why are you climbing?" he asked. I paused. "To remember, to face it." The boy smirked. You're here to punish yourself. That's not the same thing. I didn't answer. You think if you suffer enough, it will make you clean. But this mountain doesn't care about your pain, only your truth. He vanished, leaving behind only his shadow, twisting upward toward the peak. I followed. Halfway up, I stumbled, not from exhaustion, but from the weight of a memory suddenly slamming into me like wind made of stone. I was 10. Michael was 7. We had built a fort in the attic. Blankets, cardboard boxes, flashlight kingdoms. He called it Castle Forever. I called it a waste of time. I remember pushing him aside when he wanted to play. I had a math test. I had a future. He cried. I didn't even notice. The attic blurred, and I was back on the mountain, crying now, higher still. I reached a narrow ledge. At its center, a door carved into the mountainside. Not stone, not wood, flesh. It pulsed like a heartbeat. A plaque above it read, "What you buried to stay whole must now be dug up to shatter you." I placed my hand against it. It opened. Inside, it was night. No stars, no moon, just a living room. My childhood home. Clean, too clean. Like a memory overly edited, there we were. Me and Michael, older now, 20-something, sitting across from each other. The night before he died, we were drinking, laughing, but there was tension, the kind that hides behind the eyes. Dad would have hated this, Michael chuckled. Drinking in the house. Dad hated a lot of things, I replied, including failure. Michael's face changed. You think I'm a failure? It wasn't a question. It was a wound. I remembered saying nothing, just looking away, letting silence do the killing. Back then, I thought I was sparing him. Now I knew I was pushing him, closer to the edge. The vision faded. I stumbled out of the door and found myself near the summit. The air was thin, not just in breath, but in time. Reality flickered, and there it was. The cliff. That one. Not a symbol, not a memory. The actual place where it happened. And standing there was Michael, alive, whole, back turned to me. I stepped forward. Michael? He didn't move. Please. He turned slowly, and this time, his face wasn't angry. It wasn't sad. It was expectant. This is where you decide, Ben, not what happened, but why. The wind howled, and in it, I heard myself, the real memory. Not the softened version I had told myself for years. Not he slipped, not I tried to catch him, but the one I buried. He was begging me to delay the merger, to give him more time, to stop the lawyers. He thought I came to hike because I wanted to talk, but I had already signed the documents. I wanted him to stop talking. He got angry. So did I. We shouted. I pushed him, not hard, but hard enough. He stumbled. I didn't reach. I froze, watched him fall, watched the branches break, watched his body vanish into silence, and I stood there and told myself it was an accident. Now, on the mountain, my knees gave way. I collapsed, wept. He knelt beside me. There it is, he whispered. Not guilt, truth. But now you can climb the last step. I looked up, one final stair carved into the stone, leading to a small platform. No glory, no redemption, just a view, and a single stone with his name. I climbed, knee by knee, breath by breath, and when I reached the top, I placed my hand on the stone. Michael, I'm sorry. The clouds parted, not above, but within, and I saw, not forgiveness, but possibility. There's a silence that speaks. It doesn't whisper. It doesn't scream. It just remains. like the breath you held too long ago, like the name you never said, like the apology that calcified in your throat and turned into something darker. That's what the house was made of. Not wood, not brick, but of everything I never dared say. It appeared at the base of the summit, hidden behind a fold in the mountain, modest, almost unnoticeable. Just a small one-story structure with peeling white paint in a crooked mailbox. But something about it felt unbearable. The door was already open, inviting or accusing. I stepped inside, and the door vanished behind me. It looked like a home, but one that never belonged to anyone. The living room was frozen in time, furniture draped in white sheets, dust hanging midair like suspended regret. I moved through it slowly, careful not to disturb whatever haunted the place. Then I heard it, a voice, Michael's voice. "You promised you'd always protect me." I froze. It came from the hallway. Then another voice, smaller, younger. "Why didn't you say you loved me back?" Then another. "You lied, again and again, and I believed you." Not screams, not ghosts, just echoes. Of all the moments I failed to speak the truth, I entered the hallway. There were doors on either side, each marked with dates, some recent, some ancient. I picked the first one, August 3rd, 1998. I opened it. Inside, our backyard. Summer. I was 11. Michael was 8. He was holding a crayon drawing of me, him, and our dog, Rufus. He ran up, waving it proudly. "I made this for you." I remember brushing him off, telling him I was busy, but now I saw it, how his face fell, how he quietly folded the paper and walked away. The drawing fell to the ground, and I stepped on it without noticing. That was the first door. There were dozens more. March 14th, 2004. He came to me crying. A girl had broken his heart. I was 17, too proud, too cold. "You'll get over it," I said. "Don't be so soft." But now I saw how badly he needed a hug, and I had offered sarcasm instead. June 9th, 2012. He asked me to come to Mom's birthday dinner. Just once. Just show up. But I was closing a deal that day. I told him I'd try. I never did. He told her I was just busy. He always covered for me, even when I didn't deserve it. Each door opened another echo. Each echo made me smaller, not out of guilt, but grief. Grief for who I wasn't. Grief for what we could have been. Then came the last door, unmarked, at the very end of the hallway. Its knob was warm, almost pulsing. I opened it, and there he was. Michael. Not a memory, not a shadow, but him, sitting on a bed in a small, plain room, just like the one we shared as kids. He looked up at me. "There's nothing left to remember. Ben, you've seen it all." I stepped inside, heart pounding. "I was a coward," I said. I kept quiet because admitting what I did would mean destroying everything I built. He nodded. "And now?" "Now I'd burn it all to hold you one more time." The silence between us broke. He stood, and for the first time since the fall, he hugged me. Not as forgiveness, not as judgment, but as recognition of who I had been, of who I was now, of what we both lost. When the embrace ended, Michael stepped back. "There's one more place to go. Not forward, not backward, but inside." The room dissolved. The hallway melted into darkness, and I was alone again, but lighter, because for the first time, I had spoken, and the house of echoes was silent. They say the worst judgment comes from others. That's a lie. The most merciless verdict comes from the part of you that knows the truth and never forgets it. After the house of echoes dissolved, I found myself standing at the edge of a vast emptiness. There was no sky, no ground, no direction, just a white void. stretching out forever. I tried to walk forward, but every step brought me back to the same spot until I stopped resisting. That's when the floor formed beneath my feet, a dark, circular platform of cold, black stone, and in the center, a chair. No walls, no judge, no jury, just a chair facing me, empty. And then, I was in it, no memory of moving, just the sudden awareness that I was sitting in it, and across from me, seated in a second chair I hadn't seen before, was me, not the older version I'd become, not the man I presented to the world, but the boy I used to be, the true me, before I learned how to lie. Before I buried the guilt beneath logic and inheritance and lawyers and silence, he looked at me with eyes too honest. "Let's begin," he said. His voice was my own, but it didn't shake. "State your name." "Benjamin Carter." "And what have you done?" "Benjamin?" I hesitated. He waited. I tried the usual. "I made a mistake," but he tilted his head. "A mistake is when you forget your keys. You pushed your brother off a cliff. Say it." The words trembled on my tongue, but I said them. "I killed my brother." The space rippled. The void bent inward, as if reality itself recoiled at the admission. But he didn't flinch. "Why?" I wanted to scream, to tell him the whole story, that we had fought about the house, about Dad's will, about the company. Michael had always been the softer one. He wanted to divide everything equally. I didn't, and when we hiked together that day, I didn't plan it, but the resentment was there, the anger, the entitlement. And when we stood near the edge of that cliff, he said something I don't even remember anymore, and I just reached out, pushed 1 second, and his scream dissolved into the wind. "I was angry," I finally whispered. "I told myself it was the moment, but the moment was just an excuse." The younger me leaned forward. "You built your life on that lie. How did it feel?" I closed my eyes. It felt like climbing a mountain with my hands covered in blood. No matter how high I got, I never felt clean. The space around us shifted again. The void took shape. Suddenly, we were surrounded by mirrors floating, suspended. Each one reflected a different version of me. The businessman, the charming brother at Christmas dinner, the son who delivered a eulogy at Michael's funeral without shedding a tear, the man who stood at the top of a building alone, the night after the poisoning. Each mirror cracked as I looked at it. One by one, they shattered. Until all that was left was him, the boy, the one who used to share his toys, who tied his brother's shoelaces, who whispered secrets under the blanket, the part of me that never wanted this. "So what now?" I asked. "Is this the end?" He stood. So did I. And for the first time in this entire journey, he stepped forward and merged into me. It wasn't redemption. It wasn't forgiveness. It was integration of guilt, of sorrow, of love I never said, and shame I never stopped carrying. Suddenly, the void broke apart. The ground beneath me crumbled, and I fell, not into darkness, but into light, blinding, endless, and then silence. They say every mountain has a peak, but this one had no summit, only a spiral, an endless ascent through memory, guilt, and something worse, hope. I awoke on stone, cold, wind-carved. Bleeding light poured from a sky that looked cracked, like an old painting left in the rain. The mountains stretched above me, gray, unclimbable. Yet I knew I had no choice. This was the place, the last threshold, the mountain where I had ended his life. My feet moved before my mind could protest. Every step echoed like a prayer I didn't deserve to whisper. Around me, the world twisted, less a landscape and more a memory. There was the crooked pine we'd passed on our hike, the worn trail where we'd argued, the rock where Michael had stopped to tie his boot, and I I had looked at him like a stranger, but something had changed. The path wasn't empty. Now, shadows lined the way. Figures, flickering forms from the past. My father, standing with his back turned. My mother, weeping at the dinner table. Old friends, distant business partners, the girl I once loved but never called back. And between them, Michael. Not one version, many. A child chasing fireflies. A teen with his first heartbreak. A young man holding up our father's will, smiling, saying, "It's okay, Ben, we'll work it out." Each form vanished as I approached, like breath on a cold mirror. Gone, out of reach, just like before. I kept climbing. Hours, days, time was unraveling. I passed a fork in the path, one leading toward a peaceful grove, golden and still. The other continued up, toward thorns, jagged rocks, and black clouds. I hesitated, and that's when I heard it. Ben. Soft. So soft I nearly missed it, but unmistakable. Michael's voice, calling from above. So I climbed the harder path, because if this journey had taught me anything, it was this. Peace is earned, not chosen. At last, I reached the place, the ledge, the one I had stood on. The one he had fallen from. The wind screamed like it remembered. I dropped to my knees, and I cried. Not the tight, careful crying of funerals or regrets, but the kind of weeping that breaks something open inside. I didn't beg for forgiveness. I didn't speak. I just let it all fall out, until the silence came back, and with it, a footstep. I turned, and there he was, Michael, not a ghost, not a vision, but him. As I remembered him the last time I saw him alive. Simple jacket, soft eyes, a cut on his cheek from the hike, still healing. He didn't speak, just looked at me, waiting. "I'm sorry." The words fell out like ash. I was angry. I wanted to win. I thought if I got everything, maybe it would feel something. But it didn't. It never did. You were the better man, Michael, and I broke again, fell forward, but he didn't vanish, didn't turn away. He stepped closer and slowly, quietly, sat beside me. We stared out at the clouds drifting below, together. "Do you remember," he said softly, "when we were kids? That night we snuck out to see the stars?" I nodded. "You were scared," he smiled, "but you came anyway." "Because I asked you to," I laughed, choking on the sound. "And you brought that stupid blanket with the ducks on it. You hated that blanket, but you didn't want me to be cold." His hand brushed mine, not with judgment, but warmth. "That's who you really were, Ben. Not this, not what you did." I turned to him. "Then why did you come here? Why now?" He looked down at the ledge, at the place his life had ended. "Because I waited for you to see, to feel, not just guilt, but the love you buried underneath it." The wind carried our silence for a while. Then he stood. "You're not done yet. There's still one more place, one more truth." I stood beside him. "What is it?" He didn't answer, just offered his hand. I took it, and the mountain began to crumble beneath us. Not in destruction, but release, as if the earth itself was exhaling, and we fell again, this time, together. It began with silence, not the peaceful kind, not the kind that follows forgiveness. This silence was dense, wet, heavy, like water pressing against your chest, the kind that lives in places where words go to drown. And then the river appeared, dark, endless, a vast current slicing through a void of pale light and memory fog. There was no shore, just a trembling wooden raft, tethered to a stake driven into sand made of ash. Michael stood beside it, still barefoot, still calm. "This is where they all come," he said, gazing at the river. "Every soul that's ever left something unsaid." I looked around. No sky, no wind, no stars, only the hush of water swallowing time. "What happens if we don't cross?" Michael looked at me then, not cruel, just honest. "You'll never leave." We stepped onto the raft. It creaked like it remembered every secret ever spoken on its back. Michael took up the oar. I took nothing, because what could I offer? What words did I deserve to bring? As we drifted, the river began to shimmer, not with light, but with voices. At first faint, then louder. Whispers, a symphony of things never said. "I loved you, but I didn't know how to show it. Please come home. I forgive you. It was me. I'm sorry. Why didn't you stay?" Some voices I recognized. My father's trembling apology, my mother's quiet grief, my own voice, years younger, muttering a truth I never said aloud. "I was jealous of you, Michael, of how they loved you, of how you never had to fight for anything, of how I always felt like the second draft." I closed my eyes. The river surged. Suddenly, shapes began rising from the water. Figures, not ghosts, not quite memories, but echoes. A young Michael, maybe 10, crying after our dad slapped him. Something I had stood and watched. "Why didn't you stop him?" the boy asked. A teenage version of myself, locking the door so Michael couldn't come in and comfort me after my first heartbreak. "Why did you push him away?" A girlfriend I ghosted, staring with kind, hurt eyes. "Why did you leave without a word?" Every unsaid thing took form. Every avoided moment demanded to be seen. The raft rocked. I dropped to my knees, shaking. "I can't do this," I whispered. "Yes, you can," Michael said, "because the worst part is still ahead." The water darkened, the river narrowed, and there it was, the final figure, my true self, not the soul, not the man, but the moment, frozen, unmoving, replaying endlessly on the water like a film loop. Me, standing on the edge. Michael, laughing, unaware. My hand, reaching out, touching his back, pushing, and the silence that followed. I fell forward, face to face with it. "Why did you do it?" the memory asked. "Because I hated how much I loved you," I said, barely breathing. "Because I was afraid there wasn't enough in this world for both of us. Because I thought winning would make me whole." The river stilled. Michael sat down beside me, and for the first time, he wept, not for his death, but for me. "Do you remember," he asked through the tears, "what you said when you were 7, and I broke my leg?" I shook my head. "You crawled into my hospital bed, held my hand, and said, 'If you're broken, I'm broken too.' You meant it. You still do." The raft began to dissolve beneath us, not from weight, but because the river had heard enough. The voices began to fade. The current stopped pulling, and for a moment, there was only stillness. We stepped into the shallows, no longer trapped, but not yet free. Ahead lay a field, quiet, silver, full of stars, not above, but growing from the ground. The final place, where endings meet beginnings. It was quiet again, but not the suffocating silence from before. This was the kind that follows a storm, when the sky is still heavy, but the ground has stopped shaking. We stood at the edge of the field, Michael beside me, barefoot, as always. The soil was soft, almost warm, and from it grew stars. Yes, stars, not flowers. each one flickering gently, like memories still breathing. And as we walked among them, I realized these were not just my memories. They were everyone's. Every soul who had stood in this field before, every regret ever turned into grace. "What is this place?" I asked, still afraid of the answer. Michael smiled, the kind of smile that holds both sorrow and peace. "The field of forgiveness. But it's not about being forgiven by others." He paused. "It's about forgiving yourself." Those words hit harder than any ghost, any vision, any river. Because forgiveness for myself had always been the one thing I believed I didn't deserve. I kept walking. The stars shimmered around my feet, pulsing like heartbeats. And then I saw him, me, not a vision, not a shadow, but the man I used to be, in a fine suit, polished shoes, eyes hollow with ambition. He looked up at me. "You climbed over him to get here," he said. "Over your own blood." "I know," I whispered. "You lied to everyone," he added. "Even yourself." "I know." "You left him there, broken at the bottom of that cliff, and walked away like it was gravity's fault." "I know." There was no fight left in me, just truth. I stepped closer to that version of myself, took his hand, and said the words I'd never dared speak. Not to him, not to Michael, not to God. "I'm sorry, I'm so deeply, fully, endlessly sorry, and I forgive you." The man faded into light, and the stars beneath our feet flared in silence. Michael placed a hand on my shoulder. And for the first time, I felt its weight, not as judgment, but as warmth. "You know," he said softly, "I never stopped loving you, even when I fell." Tears came then, not the kind you fight off, the kind that fall because the soul can finally breathe. "Can you ever forgive me?" I asked. Michael didn't answer right away. He just smiled. "You already answered that yourself." The sky above us opened, and for the first time since death, I felt something I never thought would return. Lightness, not joy, not redemption, but possibility. The soul's version of dawn. Behind us, the field shimmered. Ahead, a narrow path wound through a forest of starlight. I turned to Michael. "Do we walk it together?" He nodded. "For as long as we need to." And so we walked. Not to erase the past, but to honor it, step by step, into whatever came next. And if you ask me now, after all the death and memory and pain, what I believe, I'd say this: every soul is more than its worst moment, and sometimes the deepest form of justice is mercy, even if it takes a lifetime after death to find it. They say the wind in the afterlife carries voices. Not the loud ones, the whispered ones. The confessions we never dared to make, the goodbyes we never said, the forgiveness we thought we didn't deserve. And somewhere, between the echo and the silence, I remain. I thought the end came when my brother looked into my eyes and forgave me. I thought I had crossed the river of guilt and climbed the mountain of truth. I thought redemption was a door that opened when sorrow was deep enough. But the afterlife, whatever this place is, does not deal in clean endings. It stretches, breathes, and pulses with memories, even those we think we buried. Somewhere, a wind still carries the laughter of two boys chasing fireflies. Somewhere, a ripple in a river still holds the sound of his voice yelling, "I found it," when he uncovered our buried treasure under the willow. Somewhere, a crack in the stone still remembers the sound of my sobbing the night I decided I'd be the one to inherit it all, even if it cost me him. That's the thing about silence. It holds more truth than noise ever can. There are places in this world beyond time, after the light faded from my brother's eyes, and even after his spirit rose like the smoke of an old song. I remained, not because I was cursed to, not because I was condemned, but because part of me didn't want to leave, because part of me was still afraid. What if forgiveness wasn't real? What if I imagined it in that fragile moment out of desperation? What if he only gave it because he wanted peace for himself, not for me? I wandered the edge of his memory for what felt like lifetimes, listening, watching, hoping I'd see him again. But souls, I've learned, don't speak like they used to. They echo in images, in sensations, in moments that appear like dew in the morning, then fade before you can touch them. One day, I don't know how long after, I saw him again. He stood by the tree from our childhood backyard, the one we carved our initials into when we were 8 and 10. He was running his fingers over the bark. I couldn't move, couldn't speak, only watch. And then he turned, and he smiled. Not the smile from our adult years, not the one forced between family photos or boardroom pleasantries, but the real one. The crooked, goofy grin he wore the day we got caught sneaking cookies and blamed the dog. He didn't speak. He just nodded, slow, certain, like an older soul greeting another. And in that silence, I heard it. I forgive you. Not in words, not in sound, but in the way his shoulders no longer carried the weight of betrayal, in the way his eyes no longer held the wound I gave him. And I cried. Yes, even here, we can cry. Somewhere now, I rest, not in peace, not yet, but in the space between regret and release. I've learned to carry my guilt not as punishment, but as a reminder. I've learned that redemption isn't a moment, it's a way of walking, a posture of the soul, a willingness to never stop trying to be better, even when no one is watching. I don't know if there is a heaven in the way the living believe, but I've seen something that feels close. It's the smile of a brother reborn without anger. It's the wind that rustles trees long gone. It's the memory of a voice, soft and sure, that says, "You're still my brother." That's what remains in silence, and it's enough. Thanks for watching the whole video. Please give me a like and